Hello there, my fellow boomers, old farts, and over 55 crowd. I'm Doug, and you're listening to Dying to Retire, a show about retiring on your own terms from a guy who is actually doing it. Think of this show as those late nights sitting around the fire pit, a cigar in hand, a beer or two, no wives or girlfriends around to hear it, just no shit conversation and a little friendly judgment between guys who have earned the right to talk some shit. If you know, you know. Let's get started. Welcome back. Let's start today's episode talking a little bit about Casa Douglas, behind the scenes, actually. I should be back in Guatemala in about 2 weeks. Now, I know I've been saying this for what feels like every episode, but at this point, you are probably thinking I've been living in the world's longest 2-week countdown. But this time, I really think we are there. Casa Douglas is basically finished. There are a few things that have to happen before I can finally call it home. And one thing changed this week that has really irritated me. Originally, I had been told we could have the appliances delivered and installed before I did the final walkthrough. That made sense to me. Walk through the house, test everything from the plumbing to opening the refrigerator, run the dishwasher, make sure the stove works. Sign the paperwork, done, right? Now they have changed it. Now they're telling me I have to do the walkthrough first, then sign the final paperwork, and only after that can the appliances be delivered and installed. So now I'm going to be making several trips back and forth between Antigua and Guatemala City waiting on deliveries. That is just one of the things that no one really tells you about building a house overseas. Everybody loves showing you the beautiful finished kitchen, but no one tells you that you'll probably spend 2 to 3 days waiting for the refrigerator guy. The funny part is, and I'm probably going to be sleeping in that house before there is actually anything in it. No bed, no couch, no chair, nothing. I will probably walk into my retirement house carrying a pillow and a blanket. Now, that's not exactly how HGTV sells retirement, but at least you guys will all be entertained. And there are a few things I want to knock out while I'm there. I kind of want to pay 6 months in advance for the homeowner dues, get that done. I want to go to the electric company and pay ahead there too. So in case if I travel home, the stuff is still covered so our bills don't rack up. And the more things I can automate now, the fewer things I have to worry about later. Internet is still on the list. Now, the wife and I don't watch as much TV as a lot of people do. I mean, over the air TV or cable TV. I definitely don't. And I will be the first one there for the next few months before she comes down to visit because she's still working. So I may just try to arrange an internet service while I'm there. If not, I can use my phone for a little while to upload the podcast and videos. Then that is what I'm going to do until I get everything settled. Not a big deal. It's just part of building a life somewhere else. But as it turns out, Guatemala was not the biggest headache I had this week. Maryland was. You remember I told you a while back about the plumbing problem we had here at the house? Fortunately, it was caught before the basement was flooded because it could have been a complete disaster. We ended up replacing around 50 to 60 feet of the sewer pipe inside the house and another 60, 70 feet outside. Something about bellies and all the other stuff. If you're a plumber, that's your language, right? It wasn't a small repair. It wasn't a cheap repair. State Farm finally approved the claim. I thought, great, one less thing to worry about. The check finally showed up, and on the check, it had my name, it had the mortgage company listed as a payee, and it had my regular bank listed as a payee. This is where things get stupid, right? Because all of this has to be endorsed by them before I can cash it in a bank. The closest branch of the mortgage company is somewhere around 400 miles away. I simply can't walk in and get the check endorsed. No, I have to upload documents, fill out some more forms, use another Claims Hub website, wait for approvals, upload more documents, wait some more. And apparently the 21st century solution for everything nowadays is just another fucking website. No one wants you to actually talk to another human being anymore. And everything is somehow more efficient, they say, but efficient for who? It sure the hell isn't efficient for me because more weeks were added on to this process. And then it gets better. My regular bank, who's also listed on the check as a payee, a recipient, however you want to call it, it means I have a loan with them, except I don't. The only home improvement loan I ever had with them for this house was paid off almost a decade ago. So now the check they already mailed to me has to be canceled because my bank will never endorse it because they're not vested into the check. So they won't even accept the check, even if it's being deposited into them. So the insurance company needs to issue another check. The first check took what, 2 weeks to get here? Now we have to do this whole song and dance all over again. And the timing can't be worse. By the time the replacement check gets here, I will probably already be back in Guatemala, likely for months. So now my wife has to deal with that while I'm gone. And trust me, I'm going to hear about that. Hopefully, I can get the mortgage lender to, instead of sending an endorsed check back to me, just go the direct deposit route to speed up the process. Not sure if they will do it, but it's worth asking. This is exactly why I kept talking about paying my mortgage off. Not because I can't afford to keep making payments, I can. It's because I'm tired of somebody else's bureaucracy having a say in my life. A loan I paid off 10 years ago, still showing up on a check today, that's not a fluke. That's how today's system works. There's always another form, there's always another department, and there's always another 2 fucking weeks. There comes a point where peace of mind is worth more than squeezing another percentage point out of my investments. I am getting closer to that point every month. That has been my week. Some progress in Guatemala, a whole lot of nonsense here in Maryland. Hopefully, by the time we do this, I will be sitting in Casa Douglas instead of arguing with my insurance company or my mortgage company. This past week, I put out a video about buying a car in Guatemala. If you're thinking about retiring in Guatemala or elsewhere in Latin America or anywhere in the world, sooner or later, you're going to have to answer a couple questions. Are you even going to drive? Are you even going to own a vehicle? If you are you going to buy a gas vehicle, a hybrid, or an EV? And that was the topic of the video. What I want to do here is take that conversation I had in the video, take it one step further, because the more I thought about it afterward, the more I realized the bigger issue is not electric cars at all. It's where the entire automotive industry is heading. I honestly think American car makers are headed for real trouble domestically and overseas. And I'm not talking about 20 years from now. I think it's already started. The first problem is price. Most vehicles are already overpriced by $20,000 to $25,000 here in the United States, and that's in my opinion. Now ship that same car to Mexico or Guatemala, add freight, add import duties, add dealer markup. Now ask yourself, who's going to fucking buy it? The math does not work for a whole lot of people. But I actually think the bigger problem is what happens after you buy the vehicle. And I'm talking about how American car manufacturers and some Europeans have become so obsessed with controlling repairs. Everything has proprietary software. Everything has lockout codes. Everything needs another scan tool. Everything has another computer that has to recognize the new part before the vehicle will operate properly after repaired. That might sound like progress, but I'm not convinced it is. You know, it really does not matter whether you are here in the United States or living abroad as an expat. There is always, I know a guy. I need a plumber? I know a guy. Need somebody to rebuild a transmission? I know a guy. Need an electrician? I know a guy. Need someone to fix your refrigerator? I know a guy. That is how the world has worked for generations. You find somebody who knows what they're doing, you stick with them, they fix it, you pay them, and everyone goes home happy. This is especially true throughout Guatemala and the rest of Latin America and other parts of the world too. Good mechanics build reputations over decades. People trust them, families recommend them, and this is how business gets done. Now imagine that same mechanic knows exactly how to fix your vehicle. He has the tools, he has the experience, he replaces the bad part. But the vehicle will still not run because the frickin' manufacturer says the computer has to authorize the repair first. The mechanic did everything right. The owner paid for the repair, especially if it's a used vehicle, an older used vehicle. The vehicle is mechanically sound, but the software says, fuck no, you can't go. This is crazy. This is not making a better automobile. This is making the owner dependent on the manufacturer forever. I think buyers overseas are eventually going to vote with their wallets, just like I tell everybody to vote with your feet. If Chinese manufacturers continue improving quality, if they continue building vehicles that local mechanics can still actually work on and repair, the other mechanics are going to have to get better in hybrids and electric vehicles, but they are. But they do it without having to sell all the subscription services, without the proprietary software, without the lockup codes, without asking permission from the factory. People are going to notice. I'm not saying Chinese vehicles are perfect, far from it. But what I'm saying is Buyers care about ownership. If someone spends 30, 40, 50,000 on a vehicle, they expect to actually own it, not rent permission to repair it. US automakers seem to be forgetting that. They have become so focused on creating recurring revenue after the sale that they're risking the sale itself. Trying to turn the vehicle ownership into a subscription service is eventually going to bite them right on the ass. I really believe that. And I think we're going to see that happen overseas before we see it happen here in the US. It will be interesting to watch over the next 10 years because I think Guatemala and the rest of Latin America and much of the third world are going to be the canary in the coal mine to tell us about where the automotive industry is actually headed. Now, here is a story straight out of the Twilight Zone. Have you guys heard about the new mayor of New York City, Zohan Mandami? I think that's how you pronounce it. He proposed and now is doing the initial planning for the city to spend, $70 million of taxpayer money to open up and run city-owned grocery stores. Because when you think of great customer service, fast lanes, low prices, the first thing that comes to mind is the government running a supermarket. For this conversation, let's put aside the fact that this communist idea from this mayor and his supporters that they're pushing will undercut local grocers and drive private businesses right out of the city. Yesterday, a reporter asked the mayor and his people, how are they planning to stop people from outside the city from coming in and clearing out the grocery stores, clearing out all the taxpayer-funded shelves? And you know what their answer was? This communist pretending to be a Democrat? Their solution was that they were looking into a system where people show an ID at the door to prove that they are New York City residents. This is coming from a party that has been, for the past several years, going on every CNN, MSNBC, and other leftist media TV shows that they can find, telling the American people that asking someone to show a simple photo ID to prove who they are when they are voting is racist or sexist or worse. They literally tried to tell us that minorities and women were too stupid and incapable of obtaining a basic state-issued photo ID. It just goes to show to you that the whole fight by the Democrats against voter ID was purely smoke and mirrors the entire time. Now, don't get me wrong, the Republican Party sucks too. They played their little political games as well. But this is reason number, 430 on why I despise today's politics and the majority of politicians on both sides of the aisle, and why I try to only follow the politics that affect my retirement, like Social Security, investments, etc. One thing this whole insurance mess reminded me of is something I have been thinking about for a while. Retirement is not just about having enough money. It's also about removing unnecessary headaches from your life. I think a lot of people spend years trying to squeeze another 0.5% out of an investment, where they worry about the timing of the market, or they spend hours watching YouTube videos trying to figure out whether they should withdraw from this account before that account. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But sometimes we lose sight on something much simpler. Peace of mind has value. Sometimes it's more valuable than another percentage point on a spreadsheet. I still have a mortgage on my Maryland house. I can make the payment. Like I said, that's not an issue. The question I started asking myself was, why? Why am I still carrying it? Not because I have to. It's because I looked at it as money, not cheap money, but as money. Financially, that was the argument that still makes sense. Emotionally, I'm not so sure anymore. If paying it off means I never have to deal with another mortgage company because of an insurance claim, that has value, real value to me. The older I get, the more I realize retirement is becoming a withdrawal exercise instead of an addition exercise. I want fewer bills, fewer accounts, fewer passwords, fewer automatic withdrawals, fewer people telling me I need to fill out another form before they can help me. I simply want less nonsense in my life. I spent over 40 years working. I spent decades dealing with bureaucracy. Some of that is just part of being an adult. We all know that. Retirement is supposed to, or was supposed to be, the reward for surviving our life, all that shit. So why would you and I spend our retirements creating more complications for ourselves? Now, some of you who are listening are planning to retire overseas, maybe Guatemala, maybe somewhere else, right? Doesn't matter. Some of you are thinking about keeping your house here in the United States if you have one or wherever you are. And there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'm doing that exactly. But you need to understand what comes with that. That house does not stop needing attention just because you moved. The roof will still leak. Water heaters will still fail. Insurance companies still send paperwork. Property taxes still show up, and someone has to deal with it. And you're living 2,000 miles away. That someone might be your spouse if you're doing the split retirement like my wife and I are doing right now. Maybe a family member, maybe a property manager. And that may be where we go when my wife finally does retire and deals with her feral cats, the cat colonies she takes care of. That is something you need to think about before you make the move, not after. One of Stephen Covey's habits was begin with the end in mind. Now, I've always called that management by objective, MBO. I think that applies to retirement just as much as it does to business. Ask yourself, what do you actually want your retirement to look like? Do you want to spend your days hiking, traveling, having lunch with your wife, playing with the grandkids if you have grandkids? Or do you want to spend your Tuesday morning trying to figure out why your insurance company mailed you a check that there's no freaking way you can actually cash it? That answer should tell you a lot about the decisions you make today. I'm not saying everyone should run out and go pay their mortgage off. That's a personal decision. Every financial situation is different. But what I am saying, when you are making retirement decisions, do not measure everything only in dollars. Measure it in the stress, measure it in time, measure it in peace of mind. Sometimes those are worth far more than the math says they are. Now, here's some news about higher education from merry old England that I just read that will show you how stupid, arrogant, and broken 99.9% of colleges around the world have become. Over at Cambridge University, which when I was growing up, that was considered a very prestigious college, they have a professor named Jason Arday who made headlines a few years back being the youngest black professor in their history. Well, he's back in the news. And his whole success story, and I'm going to put air quotes, and you should, when we say success story, is coming unraveled. And the school's part in this success story is being exposed. DEI policies pushed him straight to the top, and the school paraded him around like a shiny trophy. And don't feel sorry for him. He wasn't being used. He actually used the system. And that's the real tragedy I'm looking at here. Because in addition to the school essentially pushing a lie in which qualified candidates for his professorship likely lost out in getting that job, or even worse, were never even given a fair shot. The worst part of my optics is Cambridge's DEI rules shielded this lying professor. Nobody was allowed to question his records. Independent people coming in weren't allowed. Fellow professors weren't allowed. They couldn't question his claims, which from the get-go looked fake to most people, or that his stolen work that he did, his plagiarisms and all that stuff, they would get called names or they get called out or threatened with being fired or something else. When people finally were able to look at his actual resume and the papers that he had written to get his degrees, it was discovered that he took credit for research studies that started something like 30 years before he was even born. He lied about athletic achievements that he never did. And an investigation proved he stole large parts of his papers that he wrote for his degree to get his PhD were stolen from another writer. This was a clear case of DEI really meaning didn't earn it. Now, did Cambridge fire this guy when it was found out he was flat out lying? No, they did not. Instead of kicking him to the curb, the school went straight into his official bio on their website and quickly erased the fake claims. So they sanitized his bio to clean it up. Now, this shit is straight out of George Orwell's book, 1984. When the truth made them look bad, they changed the history online and acted like the lies never happened. You can't make this shit up. And the real worst part about all of this is it's likely not an isolated incident in the British schools. Hell, it likely occurs in 99.9% of the US colleges. Now, I know this happens in the federal government, at least it did, or I had seen it until I retired in 2024. Think about it. What are your thoughts? What should happen to this professor? What should happen to the school? Moving on. It's funny how things come up. The other day, my wife and I were at a nice Mexican restaurant down the road in Rockville. The name of the restaurant's called El Mariachi. I highly recommend it. It was a late lunch, early dinner for us. We call it dinner because most weekends we only eat 2 meals a day, breakfast and that early dinner. If you eat the same way, what do you call that early dinner? I'm curious. Anyway, we're sitting there having dinner, talking about Casa Douglas and how I'm heading back to Guatemala soon. And she's thinking about her eventual retirement as well. Then she drops what her boss said to her the other day. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like this. In this day and age, very few people are actually fortunate enough to retire. And for the first time, well, the first time I can remember, my wife said that part out loud. Now, if you can retire, you should take advantage of it. That was the message because your health may not stick around long enough for you to enjoy it. We started talking about family members on both sides, as well as friends and coworkers who never got the chance. Some never retired. Some retired and never got to enjoy it. Some retired and died right afterwards. And I told her boss was 100% correct. Most of us have earned our retirements. We cannot let anybody try to take that away from us or make us feel guilty for taking it. Most of us boomers and early Gen Xers put in 35, 40 years of hard work. We paid our taxes. We took financial hits when the markets went crazy on us. So when it comes to retirement, we earned it, no matter what a lot of the younger generations say today. Stupid shit like you spent our future or you ruined it for us or you're selfish spending our inheritance. F that. Now, I'm not going to go into the good or bad about Gen Z or the millennials. That's a whole episode to itself. But I will say this directly to them, not to my fellow boomers, not to my over 55 Gen Xers. Nobody handed us a stack of cash, or it was an easy path for us when we started. My name's not Rockefeller, Clinton, Kennedy, nothing like that. We earned every single dollar in our retirement, in investments, and I'm not your daddy. That's not my job. You are responsible for your own shit, just like I'm responsible for mine. Now, I know a lot of you like to play it, and there's some boomers and Gen Xers who are super woke. Sorry, they don't work a lot, but they woke a lot. They play It Takes a Village, all this other games and shit. And that is normally followed by You Ruined Our Future game. Now, for you Gen Xers, not Gen Xers, I'm sorry, I'm not talking to you. For you millennials and you Gen Zers, while you may be the missing idiot of a village, that village is not my fucking village. Older people and their wealth, and if you can call it that, are not some community charity for you to go to and demand cash from. In regards to my wife and I, both of our parents, at least my dad and my wife's father, always talked about having a home that family could go to, maybe even run to if they needed. My wife's father always wanted his house in Guatemala City to be that place, somewhere the family could stay and go get caught up on their roots and their heritage. Right now, that house needs a lot of work. You've heard me talk about no water or no water pressure, toilets that don't flush or that need a bucket to help them flush. And there's plenty more issues with that house. Once Casa Douglas, the one we're building outside of Antigua, is set up and done, we'll do the basics at the house in the cities so it will actually serve as a way station. And what I mean by that, family can fly into the Guatemala City airport, hang out at that house for a day or two, and then head down to us outside of Antigua. So short story long, sitting across from me at that Mexican restaurant in Rockville, my wife realized something. We're actually doing what her parents always wanted to do, but never could. We're building a comfortable setup for our future, and we're still keeping the house here in Maryland so my son or another family member has a solid foundation when we're gone. But we're setting up that house in Guatemala, not just for us, but family. But then she made the joke in typical her fashion. She said, I better make sure the house in Casa Douglas is finished properly before she comes down there because she's a person that hates change and all the other stuff. She'll first come down to visit because she's still working. And once she's retired, it will be more of a solid place for her to live. However, she even joked that when I get old and slow down, there's no way in hell she's changing my adult nappies or pushing me around in a wheelchair. Besides, a wheelchair ain't ever going to work on those cobblestone streets anyway. She also said she'd push me off a cliff or stick me in a senior home in Guatemala if that day ever came. And I actually believe her. However, at the end of this, like I like to say, short story long, that's the reality for a lot of us, boomers and Gen Xers. We earned our retirement. And here's a little update to end this episode. The Volcano Fuego, just outside of Antigua, decided to put on a little bit of a show starting yesterday, and it erupted, and it's still going on. Now, from the master bedroom balcony at Casa Douglas, I have a front row seat of Volcán Fuego. For your background, I was not watching the news that closely, especially since Fuego is often essentially a version of the Earth just burping and farting. This is what happens when you're part of the, what do they call it, the Pacific Ring of Fire, the 25,000-mile horseshoe-shaped zone holding over 450 active and dormant volcanoes. Pacific Ring of Fire has over 75% of the world's total volcanoes, be it active or dormant. Now, there's a lot of tectonic plates crashing into each other. That's the science behind it. They crash into each other, they pull out. So you're going to have a lot of activity. I got notified how bad it was when a gringo buddy of mine called me up this morning to check if I was at Casa Douglas because I've been going back and forth when I'm going to arrive. He was just checking to make sure I was okay. After confirming I was not there, he gave me the complete rundown at that time on the evacuations, the road closures, and so on. At that time when he called me, the Guatemalan government had even blocked access to the road leading right up to the gated community where Casa Douglas is. Later in the day, I spoke with my realtor down there in Guatemala, and she just laughed it off as a typical dusting of ash. She was trying to be optimistic and said everything would be back to normal in a couple of weeks, which is when I plan to fly back down. So the timing will be a little interesting. Now, my wife is over here back in Maryland having a few anxieties about the whole thing. She is looking at the news and is concerned about the reality of living right next to an active volcano. Meanwhile, I'm taking the old military EOD mindset. To paraphrase one of them, either I'm right or suddenly it's not my problem anymore. Now, seeing all that ash going everywhere got the hamster wheels in my head spinning. Has someone ever done a YouTube video on how to properly clean the inside and outside of your home and car after the local volcano erupted? I think I'll work on that with my gringo buddy once I get settled back in Casa Douglas. So there is that. That's it for this week's episode of Dying to Retire. If you have a question or comment on this episode or any other, send me an email at dyingtoretirepodcast@gmail.com. Hopefully this saves you a retirement or expat headache or two. As always, I'm Doug. This is Dying to Retire, and I'll see you in the next episode.